All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of Inside the Command Center, where we try to get you as close to the action as we can. Today, for that, we welcome Zach Selby. Zach, how are you?
Doing all right, yeah. I mean, we've been trying to get together for feels like it's been like 3 months now, right? for,
I know,
for whatever reason, we
juggling
just haven't been able to
schedules.
connect. But hey, I'm here
Uh,
now, and let's get ready to talk some ball.
and we're always glad to have you. First, the winner of this week's card giveaway was Austin Douglas. So give me your information and we'll get you taken care of there. Zach, I was running through trying to find a picture for the thumbnail, and I was curious, did you write a book?
I haven't written a book, but there might be something coming soon on that regard. So stay tuned.
Okay, there is a picture of a book with your name at the bottom.
What is it called?
I should have written it down. It's like the best game.
Yeah.
My
So
favorite game is a day.
yeah. So don't want to reveal too much, obviously, but
Okay,
So I was approached about contributing to a project called Game of My Life, which is a book that's been around for a while now. But it goes through, it's like basically a collection of anthology of players who described the best game that they've had playing for Washington, whether it was the Redskins or the Washington football team or whatever. And I was asked to write an extra chapter for the updated version, and I'll let you buy the book first to decide to figure out who it is. But it is a very well known player that just recently got into the greatest players of all time, the 90 greatest list. So be sure to
okay.
check it out.
All right, very good. Let's see. This is year 4 for you. Is that right for
Yeah,
Commanders?
surprisingly, yes, it is. So I guess actually it'll be so ended with year four is coming on to my gonna be year 5 in September, which
Yeah.
is just
Okay.
crazy to me.
You've seen a lot of people come and go in those 5 years.
I seen a lot of people come and go, a lot of names come and go, more than the average team employee. But yeah, it's been a pretty crazy experience getting to watch all the craziness thing that's been going down with the team with the past few years.
Just bombs dropping all the time while you're there. Can you, if I put you on the spot, can you think of what maybe the craziest thing you've seen since you've been there?
Man,
Because you've had some things come out of left field in in the last
for
4 or 5
sure.
years.
I think like for what as an employee, what I can publicly speak on, it probably is like, and I think this is honest, like it would be an honest answer. Like, is the name change is really hard to top for a lot of things, just because
Right.
I remember where I was when I got a notification from my boss saying like, hey, we're gonna put this press release on the website. Make sure you get it up. And I was thinking like, okay, like just some, I didn't really think too much about it until I started reading it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, what? We're
Right.
gonna retire the name? Like, that's just, it was just wild to me that was happening, because it felt so surreal. And I'm sure a lot of people did. I didn't grow up a fan, but I was very much aware of the team, obviously, and
Sure.
see something that has been around for so long, and to go through like this massive change was, I mean, it was pretty crazy. And I guess what was even crazier was the 2 years after, that I got the 1% I was involved with going through all that process of the rebrand and everything. That was quite a lot, but it was definitely a resume builder, I would say. I don't think there's a lot of people that can say they went through an entire rebrand and got out of it on the other end. So, but yeah, it's been wild.
No doubt about it. It's been so crazy from this far back,
Mhm.
being that close. I can only imagine that you were doing the show. I know you're a bit of a foodie. You were
Yep.
doing the show with players and their recipes. What is the best recipe you got from the show?
So I did do like a lot of different recipes that I've already tried.
Okay.
Um and but there were a few that I like that there were a few that I did drew that like I've enjoyed the most. Sam Cosmo with his tiramisu is probably one of my favorites, because that's a simple and just amazing recipe to do, and it looks really good on top of it. Like, no one's gonna say no to tiramisu.
Ever.
Um, my chocolate chip cookie recipe that I made for John, that's always a great one. That's that's the recipe that I feel the most confident in, that I feel like I can do the best. Let's see. So the cheesecake I made for John Bates, I had never made like a regular cheesecake before, but I felt pretty good about that one. I think the red velvet cheesecake that I made for James Smith Williams was probably my favorite, because I had never made. I don't dabble too much into red velvet, not just because I don't like it, just because I just haven't really tried it. And a red velvet cheesecake and cheesecakes in general are so particular, like the way that you have to like cook them, like in the oven, you have to put them in like in a water bath, and then you have to make sure that they don't crack when you cool them, or else it's going to look bad. You have to figure out a way to fix that. Luckily that one did not. um, but yeah, I had to make my own crust and everything. That was another experience, but it turned out pretty good. And what I always enjoyed is the players, they never had a bad thing to say about it. So
Nice.
that was always really, it took a little bit of a risk to stick my neck out there and see if they liked it, but they all enjoyed it. So hopefully we'll get it back for a season 2.
There is a misconception out there, I think, about the red velvet, that it is just chocolate cake with red food coloring. Please tell the folks at home that is not the case.
It's not necessarily the case, although it is. They're not wrong, but they're not. They're not wrong, but there's some more context to it as well. So it is chocolate, but what you do need for it is you need the vinegar to give it a little bit of more of like a tart taste, and buttermilk too. That also helps out with the taste as well. So where the red velvet comes from, I think they used to put like some different kind of vegetables or something, like I think like beet juice or something in there to make it look red. But yeah, like there are the two differences: vinegar and buttermilk.
All right. There have been all kind of off-field stuff, like the events that you can go to. East-West Shrine Bowl was up. Senior Bowl was up. The Combine came around. Which of those did you get to? And which of those are you looking forward to getting to at some point? Have you been to all of them? Do you have a preference?
I've been to all of them at one point or another. Last year I was at the Senior Bowl, and that was during the name drop. So
Nothing to see here.
Fun story about that. I guess February 2nd, all the players from each team are kind of basically put into one room, and you're allowed to talk to whoever you want to talk to. It's just a matter of getting them to talk to get their attention and everything. And you also have there was their quarterbacks were a big deal last year, so they had their own podiums as well. So on top of that, I'm trying to make sure all the buttons on the website work in terms of flipping the name from Washington football team to Commanders. So I'm literally in a press conference with Malik Willis with a microphone asking a question, my laptop in the other, trying to multitask and just try to like make sure that everything works properly on the website. There's no hint of Washington football team on the homepage. And also asking Malik Willis about like when to take off and when to drop back as a passer. And then on top of that was only part of the day. I was also doing that pretty much throughout the morning, just trying to balance doing the name drop stuff and try to get out content, talking to people like Calvin Austin and a bunch of other offensive linemen. So it was one of the most memorable experiences I think I'll ever have. But hey, we got the job done. That's all that matters.
All right, let's see. Everybody knows at this point that the ownership seems like it's inevitable to be changed. Would you like to tell us right now who the new owner will be?
Look, if I knew that, I wouldn't be here. That's for sure. And if I did know, this would be my last podcast. It'd be the last time y'all ever saw me. But I know just about as much as everyone else does with that. And I think most people here do. They've made it pretty obvious that they're looking at future transactions. We don't know if it's a complete sale, a majority sale. We don't know what's going to happen with that. And as far as I know, look, I'm just here to do my job, and whoever the new owner is, they're going to get a really good writer. That's all my concerns. But I'm just as much in the dark as y'all.
Have you met the Snyders before?
Not in person, but I've seen them back in 2019. I saw Mr. Snyder walk around the building, and then I think I've seen him I think as he was going to the stadium. I think it was 2021, and then I've met Mrs. Snyder in person one time, and that was it.
Let's see. Biggest news I think so far is Eric Bieniemy in. I know you were at the presser.
Yep.
Incredible job. Sounded more like a head coach introductory presser than an offensive coordinator presser. He had me all pumped up. Give us your thoughts on Bieniemy and what the offense should look like. The offense has struggled to put up points. If this team could find a way to even average 22, 23 points, they'd be in the playoffs every year. So tell us about Bieniemy and what you expect from him.
I'm glad you said that, because I very much agree. If they average 22 to 23 points, they're winning 10 games. Like that, there's no other way to say it. But for me, obviously I had heard about Bieniemy, heard his reputation and everything, but I had very high expectations as to what we were going to get out of him. But he blew all those expectations away. I got fired up.
I did too.
Hardcore. There's no other way you can sit in that press conference and not see, the players like Terry, Brian Robinson, all these guys shaking their head in agreement, listening to some things he's saying. And then just hearing the way he was saying, the conviction of what he was saying, you could just tell that he knows what he is doing. And that's so encouraging. I think the offense, it's going to be a variation of the West. It's going to have some West Coast themes to it, but I don't think he's necessarily married to we have to do X, we have to do Y. He's more concerned about, hey, did we win the dang game or did we not? And did we do what we needed? Did we do what we needed to do? I have no doubts in my mind that he's going to be able to utilize a lot of these weapons. Like the receiver core is one group that I'm very excited about to see what he's going to do with it. Because I've said a lot. I'm not going to say that this receiving core is the best in the league, but I would put them up against any receiving core in the league.
Absolutely.
Just based on that, you've got Terry, you've got Jahan, you've got Curtis. You've even got players like Diami, who can just, he can add some juice when you need him to. I think that group is going to be interesting because they all do well when they get the ball in their hands quickly. And there's some of the things of the West Coast is to get the ball out quickly to players like that. And I think what excites me the most about that is that all these guys, they can get yards after the catch really, really easily. They're all quick. They can all create separation. So if I'm Bieniemy, I just can't wait to get to work with those guys. Bieniemy's main background is in running backs. You think he's got a group of running backs that I think, could maybe use another guy, whether it's free agency or the draft. I think that's going to be a group that I think is going to continue their success. Brian Robinson is still going to be the guy who's, bowling over, 8 players on the way to getting first downs. I'll never forget that play he had against the Packers where he seemed like he went through the entire defense to get to that first down. So I'm very excited about what he's going to do. The only concern, obviously, is with offensive line, obviously. But I would remind people that prior to last year when the Chiefs redid their entire offensive line, the Chiefs' offensive line was not great.
It was not good.
Yeah. So they definitely were not the unit that they were this year. And they still figured out a way to get things done. Now, obviously, having Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce and all these weapons helps, but they still found a way to get around their deficiencies. So, obviously, you want to get that fixed with, whether it's finding, what thing Cosby is going to be, whether it's a guard or a tackle. Maybe you have to figure out some issues at guard. But I'm obviously concerned about that. I'm not as worried about it being a backbreaker for this offense with Bieniemy, who did not really necessarily call the plays, but had a very big part in game planning around that. I'm not too concerned about it.
We've heard Ron talk a bunch about budget. Real quick, what is the deal with Cosby? Do you think do you think he ends up getting kicked into guard? I have never in my life seen right tackles that are healthy switched in and out like that the way they did with Lucas. Never. I watched a lot of football, and I don't know. At first maybe it was conditioning, but 4 or 5 games that wasn't conditioning anymore. Do you think Cosby ends up kicking into guard, or you think they like him at right tackle?
It's interesting because I've never seen anything like that either, and I understand that it's very rare to have a group of 5 offensive linemen start from week 1 to week 18. That's really rare to happen. There's always going to be some shifts there. There's going to be some players who come in and out, but offensive line perform the best when they have consistency as knowing who's going to be at their right or their left. And the fact that Cosby was at guard and tackle, it is somewhat of a good problem to have, because I think he did well at both. The first time that I saw him play, at guard was that first matchup against the New York Giants, and I mean he was holding his own against, like, he was reach blocking Dexter Lawrence. He was handling himself against some of the best defensive tackles around right now. So that's a good sign. But he also has the quickness to play a tackle. And I think, he definitely is a little bit undersized. I mean, he's always been more physically suited to play guard. And I think they would, if it were me, I would like to see him play guard and have, someone more prototypically a tackle. But it hurts me to say that, because I've been on the Sam Cosby as a tackle train ever since he got drafted. But I do think if they do end up deciding to put him at guard, I think he will do fine. But I also think, like, they're not so. I don't think they think that they initially have to put him at guard. I think, like, if there's a better option, a clear better option at tackle, they're going to pick him up and they'll put him at guard. But having the versatility of putting him at either guard or tackle affords them the luxury of, if they can't find a better tackle, they feel comfortable enough keeping him there for this season.
People have told me one of the things they need to improve on is tight end. I tend to disagree. I like the tight end room. There's a little bit of everything in there. Particularly, I thought Armani Rogers played really well last year when given opportunities and healthy.
Yep.
Seeing as how that was only the first year he's played it. We didn't see much of Cole Turner. He got hurt early and never really, I don't think, got back into form. And I'd suggest maybe Logan Thomas was not fully healthy last year. He certainly didn't look like himself. Do you think they'll need to restructure Thomas? Or if not, is he one of these potential casualties? And how do you see the tight end room? Because people tell me all the time we could draft tight end early, that we don't have one.
Well, I'll say I mean, I guess anything can happen, but I find it really hard to believe they're going to just flat out cut Logan Thomas just because of how much they believe in what he can do when he's healthy. So, I mean, maybe restructure, but I think definitely cutting is off the. I don't think it's something that they would strongly consider. In terms of what I think about the tight end room, I hear what some people are saying about it being a little disappointing this year, and I would agree, but that's not necessarily their fault, because they had a lot of injuries. You mentioned Logan Thomas was not really right, even though he did play in week 1. He wasn't really right until about halfway through the year, because he had a very serious injury. Let's not forget that. Like, it was honestly, like, outstanding that he was even ready to come back for week 1. And you have to remember, like, they've got 5 guys that they all, like, really like. I mean, Cole Turner had just a fantastic training camp before he had that hamstring injury, and that kind of set him back a little bit. He had, he obviously has some work to do as a blocker. That's one thing that he was working with Juan Castillo on. Even after training camp was over, you'd see him after practice working on some blocking stuff. So that's something that he has to worry about. He's a very good pass catcher, and I think once he gets his groove on, like, I think he's going to show a lot of what he can do athletically, especially near the red zone. I mean, Armani Rogers was probably the biggest surprise of training camp, just because, I mean, he had been in the position for all of 4 months, and ended up being like a really athletic. I know they really like him and his skill set. They have a lot of high hopes for what he can be. And then Curtis Hodges, we didn't really get to see much of him, but he's another guy who really popped in training camp, and they were afforded the luxury of, they kept him on IR for most of the year. But I mean, it worked out for them, because if they took him off IR, like, they might have had to, lose another player in another position. They didn't want to do that. I think, he's going to need to develop, but he has tools that, especially the pass catcher, that could really help this team. And then John Bates is one of the best blocking tight ends. Flat
criminally underrated. John Bates is.
If
given the opportunity, he can catch the ball too.
Oh yeah, he was my favorite draft pick in 2021 for a reason. It's because he was such a good pass catcher, and he just blocked better than everybody. Like, he on PFF, he had the best run blocking grade of the entire tight end class in 2021. Now, obviously, that took a little bit of backstep because he had to do more. He took on a bigger role in 2022. But I think you have a pretty solid group there. And like I said, I get people being a little upset that it didn't really work out. But they've done a phenomenal job. The Rivera coaching staff has done a great job of restructuring that entire tight end room. Because remember, like before he got there, like Jeremy Sprinkle was like your top receiver. And like all due respect,
Yeah,
Jeremy Sprinkle, like he's not anywhere close to these guys. Like
that's right.
he's just not. So I think wait till next year, let all these guys get healthy, and then see what they can do.
I couldn't agree more. Do you think they think Chris Paul is a starting guard in the league?
I definitely think that they are super leaning towards possible. Like I think they believe a lot. I think they believe a lot in what he can do. And I think they're going to give him a chance. Like I do think he's going to get a legitimate shot to have a more serious role in 2023, because like anytime Rivera talked about him, I mean he was just glowing about Chris Paul and what he could do. I mean, you saw it in training camp. Like he has very good footwork for his size. He has very good hand placement. His head is always where it needs to be. I think there may be some areas in pass protection he could improve on, but that's always something that rookies have to deal with because everybody's just so much faster than they are at the college game.
Right.
So I think with Norwell still there, I think Trey Turner creates an open spot. And I think that's one. I think going back to Sim Cosby, that kind of helps them out a lot too. So if they end up finding no other option, I think I personally would feel comfortable keeping Cosby at tackle and then putting Chris Paul at guard. Just because on talent alone, I think they've got a lot there that they can grow. Because I mean, go ahead.
You mentioned Norwell. You think he'll be on the starting 53 come next year?
I think so. Yeah. I know they like him. I know they like him and his skill set.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't heard anything to contradict that. Now, of course, I mean this is March. We're 3 days away from legal tampering. So I mean,
Right.
anything could happen. But like I said, I haven't heard in terms of all the offseason moves that could happen. I haven't heard anything really like that would make me believe Norwell would not be on the roster by at least OTAs.
Rivera has talked about a budget for this offseason. This may be, we were talking about odd off seasons. This may be one of the more interesting ones, just because where does the money come from? How much money will there be to spend in free agency? What do you think they're looking to add in free agency? Do you think that they'll there's a guy like Tremaine Edmonds at $15 or $16 million a year for middle linebacker? Is there no way you think they would do something like that strictly off of the money side? I guess is a guy like Nate Davis from Tennessee, the guard. I mean, I think is around $8 million a year. Are they going to contemplate guys like this, or you think we will not be seeing moves even on the level of that?
Well, I think free agency is always so difficult to predict, but I think you can catch some tendencies like based on what they've done in years past. So if you remember back in 2020, they tried to make a big move to get Amari Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen. 2021, they tried to make a big swing for Max Stafford.
Yep.
It didn't work out. They ended up getting Fitzpatrick. Last year they tried to get Russell Wilson reportedly, and they ended up getting Carson Wentz. So that shows you that they're willing to take one big swing at one person.
Right.
And it's come at the quarterback position mostly, but I think if they see an impact player they think can really help their team, they're not afraid to go ahead and try to get one of these players. So I think that they're going to at least try. And
the ownership change won't change their strategy as far as that goes.
According to Rivera, that didn't have a lot of bearing on what their plans are. So I think if you look at, they don't really need. Well, I guess the national reporters seem to think they need a quarterback, although they seem pretty committed to Sam Howell, at least through the offseason workout program. I think you look at linebacker. I think you look at cornerback. I think you look at offensive line, where all these positions that they definitely need help in. I could see them going for one of these quote unquote bigger fish. And if it doesn't work, they're probably going to go for value picks because if you remember, after they didn't get Amari Cooper back in 2020, they got a lot of really good cheap players that they knew could help them immediately. Logan Thomas was one of those guys.
Yep.
J.D. McKissick was one of those guys.
What is the status on J.D. McKissick?
We haven't heard really anything on J.D. McKissick.
Right.
Like, I haven't really seen him around the building. But I guess like this is March, so there's not a lot of players around. But
I just hadn't heard anything about the neck in a long time, and just wondered if you had.
No, I haven't seen or heard anything really out of it. But I mean, again, like we'll see. But again, I don't really know. But like I said, J.D. McKissick was one of those guys. Wes Schweitzer was another one of those guys who create a lot of really good value for this team. So I think they're probably going to go with players like that if they can't maybe get like a big free agent, get players that they know are going to be cheap, know are going to create value, and they know can at least give them some starting snaps.
Rivera typically has not drafted corner high. I don't think he's ever been a part of a cornerback that got drafted high. But most mock drafters and national guys have corner as a big need at 16. Do you have it as a big need at 16?
I mean, I think that this team definitely needs corner help. Just because after once Benjamin St. Juste went down, like it was very noticeable that he wasn't there.
Correct.
And I think they feel really good about the players they have at the top. I think they feel pretty good about guys like Cam Curl. Like I feel like they feel good about guys like like Kendall Fuller and Benjamin St. Juste. I even think they feel good about like Christian Holmes, like who can create value. Danny Johnson is another guy they feel good about. But they need to create more depth at that spot. So I definitely think that you could definitely use that 16th overall pick on a corner. But I think the depth of this position in this year's draft class gives them a lot of wiggle room. So I don't think they necessarily have to go after a corner at 16 just because you could probably find one in the second or the third that can help you out a lot. But with that said, there are some corners at the top of this draft that are just out of this world. My favorite player out of this draft is Christian Gonzalez. I think he's just he's amazing. I think to me he's the best corner in the draft because he
Oregon,
has
right?
What was that?
Oregon.
Yeah. So he has size. He has the ability to play man. He can play zone if he needs to. He has a very good eye for jumping routes. I think he could definitely help this team if Washington were to pick him at 16. But there are other players like Devin Witherspoon that I would feel pretty good about. He has, he's a very physical guy. Likes to stick his nose in the run game from time to time. Has a lot of really good hits. Really physical against receivers. I think you'd feel good about him. And I think Joey Porter Jr., even though he has some things that I think he could fix heading into his rookie year, he definitely has length and again a physical style that could really help this secondary, especially near the line of scrimmage.
I got a list of names. Let's run them through them, and you give me your thoughts on what happens with them this offseason. Chase Roulier. Is Chase the starting center next year, and do they have to rework that contract? I think he's due something like $12 million this year and has missed about 20 games the last two seasons.
Yeah, he's had two big, really serious, injuries. So, I mean, I wonder how, he's getting up there in age, but I think if he's on the roster, I think he's the starter.
Cole Holcomb.
That is the big one. I know Rivera said that they want to try to get Cole Holcomb taken care of. Said that at the combine. I want him back. I think he's a really good player. He's had to play middle linebacker, had to play on the outside. He's had to play in the slot. He's done a lot, and his position versatility really fits what his defense tries to do.
And I don't think would be terribly expensive, right? I mean, we're looking at six-ish, seven-ish, maybe.
I think it, and not talking about contracts specifically, but I do know that Del Rio said once that he was playing as well as a lot of the other bigger linebackers at one point during his career. I'm curious to see how much the other teams in the NFL recognize that. So I think that'll really determine his value. But like I said, I like Cole. I would really want him back.
They gave Payne the non-exclusive tag, if I'm not mistaken.
No, they gave him the franchise tag. So he's
the exclusive. That's it. Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know why I thought somebody told me that they had put the non-exclusive. Do you think they get a long-term deal done with him? What is I know they say they want to. I know people say you can't spend that much money on two defensive tackles. You got Sweat coming up. Do you think they prefer Payne to Sweat? That's a whole lot of what do you think happens
Yeah,
with
for
Payne?
sure. I think I wouldn't say that like they prefer Payne to Sweat or anything like that. Because I mean that does bring up like some other like bigger contract implications in 2024 and 2025 that like probably will need to be addressed no matter what happens with Deron Payne. But I think like if it were me, like money is kind of like it is we'll see what happens there. But I would like to think they're going to get something done just because whenever that defensive line was like when they were rolling, like that was one of the like most dominant duos in the game, like
Yeah.
flat out. Like I mean, can you name another defensive line group tackle duo besides Allen and Payne that were that good and playing the best they'd ever played in their careers? Like they
Well,
were
and Payne
yeah,
played
I mean,
like
they were
80% of
legit.
snaps.
Yeah,
Payne was like 80% of snaps, and he never gets hurt. Is the other thing with Payne that would make me more, you know, want to sign him more because he posts every week.
yeah, no, and I mean, I would love to get Payne back just because of what he means to the defense. I mean, Rivera even said like he's been he's proven himself as a key member of this defensive line even before he was putting up franchise tying records in sacks. Like I guess people look at those numbers and think that he's just kind of jumped up and done this just out of nowhere, but he's been a very reliable player for his entire career. It's just everything is kind of coming together now, and maybe he's hitting his prime.
Jeremy Reeves.
I mean, this is the best special teams player in the league. Like, that's not me saying it. That's the NFLPA saying that.
Right.
That's the NFL saying that. Like, this is the best special teams player that we've got around. I think he's a restricted free agent. I'd have to double check that, but if he's a restricted free agent, like there's no way he's leaving. Like they're probably going to tender if he's restricted, I would imagine that they would tender him. But either way, like I don't see him going anywhere.
Let's end like this, Zach. What is the biggest thing they need to do this offseason to finally get them to where they want to be?
That is a layered question. If I had to narrow it down to one thing, I think they just got to figure out a way to score in the red zone. Like it sounds very simple, but there was a lot of times last year where they would work really well in from the 30 to the 30. And then once they got close to the end zone, it just seemed like for whatever reason, their offense would just kind of stall and you were left with field goals when that's not really going to cut it. You see plays like the Taylor Heineke throw to Curtis Samuel against the Vikings, which is definitely like an outlier, but like, or like the 50-yarder he had against Jahan in the second matchup against the Giants. Like this team does have like the ability to create explosive plays. So I don't think that's a problem. I think it's like that short area effectiveness that they need to get better. And I think that's one of the things that the enemy should be able to help them with. And that goes back to getting the ball out quickly to players like Terry, getting the ball to players like Jahan, is probably like one of their best red zone threats. Like that's not even an exaggeration. Like it's definitely like I would even say like one of the best young red zone threats right now, regardless of position, is because of how effectively he can get open. Especially because people forget, like he was tied with Stephon Diggs for the most receiving touchdowns in the league before he had his hamstring injury. Like he's like a legit weapon. So and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about creating creating more points. If they scored 23 points, like they're probably going to win 10 games like last year, and they're in the playoffs, and we're having a whole different discussion about the outlook of this team going forward. So yeah, if they can get more points in the red zone, more touchdowns in the red zone, I think this team is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
I think so too. I lied. One last one. Do you think Heineke will be back?
Oh man, yeah, I think it really depends on what Bieniemy wants. Like, I know this team loves him. I know he loves this team. I mean, the bigger points of his career have been made right here, like with this team. I mean, I don't think that I don't think there's going to be another memory quite like that diving pylon
To the
score against
pylon.
the Buccaneers. Like that's one of the like the core memories of my working with this team is like seeing that from the press box. Like for like 2 minutes, I was like, oh my god, we're about to win this game. We're about to beat Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. But I also know that like he has a very good relationship with Hal. I think there are definitely like positives to keeping him. But I think it's going to depend on what Bieniemy wants because he has a lot of control over the offense and what what the direction there is going to go. But you know they've also talked about getting a veteran quarterback as well. Whether that's Heineke or one of these other Mariota or Bridgewater, just naming names out there. But
Yeah.
I think there's positives to keeping him. I really do. But again, the enemy's word is final.
Yep. Zach, I appreciate always. Are you going to the owners meetings? Where do you head off next, or you get to relax for a little bit?
I'm thankfully going to get to relax
Nice.
for
Good.
a while. Well, I guess, well, relax is probably the wrong term because we have free agency in like literally 5 days. So
Yes.
there's probably not going to be a whole lot of relaxing. But there is going to be, I guess, a reprieve is maybe the more accurate term before we get back into the swing of things here.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, buddy. Always. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, man.
I appreciate you.